Hello, my name is Amy Lightfoot. I work for the British Council in India, and we're here at the 11th Language and Development Conference in Delhi. I have with me Lizzi Milligan, who's one of our featured speakers at the conference. Lizzi's from the UK and is currently working as a lecturer in the Department of Education at the University of Bath. And she's also heavily involved in a project in Rwanda. So I wondered, Lizzi, if you could tell us a bit about that project, and particularly the focus on how you are looking at the use of English across the curriculum.
Okay, so the project is called Language Supportive Textbooks and Pedagogy. Mm-hmm. And what we have done is work with local publishers to develop textbooks which are both easier to understand from the point of view of the English within them, mm-hmm. but also looking at ways that you can develop English in maths, social studies and science. And this is in P4, which is when children have just switched from the medium of Kinyarwanda into the medium of English. Mm-hmm. And what we found in the baseline study is that the majority of children find it incredibly difficult to be learning really anything at all when they're learning through the medium of English. Mm-hmm. And this was a way to try to make it easier for them to be able to understand what's going on, but also develop their English language through writing, speaking, in different classroom contexts.
Okay, so is it a kind of CLIL-based approach? Is it? Do you know the CLIL? Is it
I do, but it's not. Yeah. It's not really that. It's more a kind of sneaky bilingual approach, really, okay. Because we're using aspects of Kinyarwanda, so there's glossaries of Kinyarwanda, okay. And also children are encouraged to be able to speak first in Kinyarwanda. That's normally the first activity, okay. When they're introduced to a new topic, mm-hmm. And then that's before they're asked to do any sort of writing or speaking in English. So it's mm-hmm. checking that they understand really the content of the maths or the science, mm-hmm. before moving through to being able to do it in the medium of English.
So it's introducing vocabulary that will come up during the lesson and that kind of thing.
Yeah, very much about the vocabulary.
Right, okay, yeah. So that sounds, that sounds like it has some overlaps with CLIL. And in fact, it's interesting because I don't know if you went to a session yesterday by Kirk Person, mm-hmm. who works in Southeast Asia, and they have a series of pilot projects there. He works with SIL. And they have a series of pilot projects where they're doing something very similar and looking at how you can layer I suppose it's the mother tongue-based multilingual education approach where you can layer the first language or mother tongue with then followed by the new language, LAL2, whatever, and then a summary at the end which goes back to the home language. So it kind of sandwiches between the two. Does that sound similar?
It's similar, but the amount of Kinyarwanda I think is probably much less.
Right,
it's just
okay.
used as almost like an entry point.
Okay.
And then from there, they're staying in English.
Okay. And what about the teachers on the project? Is there a training element for them as part of it as well?
There is. So they're trained in language supported pedagogy. Mm-hmm. So it's how to use those textbooks, but also being confident and comfortable in different pedagogical techniques, because it's a lot more of an active classroom than what they're used to. There's a lot more activities, 3 or 4 activities normally in one 40-minute mm-hmm. lesson, and it's for them to feel comfortable doing that sort of teaching, mm-hmm. which is difficult given the amount of English capacity that many of those teachers have.
Right, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it fairly low at the moment?
It's really mixed, actually.
Right.
But it was a very sudden shift from French to English. So the majority of the teachers we worked with had been trained in French. Uh-huh. And then it was a switch straight over into English. So a lot of them found it better that they were allowed to use small amounts of Kinyarwanda. Right. Although there was also some resistance from other teachers about using any Kinyarwanda in the classroom because it's so against national policy. So it's interesting to see the differences between different teachers.
And was there any suggestion that French should be used alongside it, or was that just...
No, French had very much been put to the side. We heard small amounts of French between teachers when they were outside of the classroom. Yeah. So French is still being used in a conversational way. Right. But they were very much on board with English. Mm-hmm. But what you found is that often the way they were able to teach was limited by their English. So they would have a textbook, say, and they would be writing on the board and getting children to repeat the words exactly as they are in the textbook because they didn't have that capacity to talk around the issue. Right. They needed to use those exact vocabulary.
Okay. I think, it sounds really interesting, and the link to Lizzi's talk will be accompanying this video, so you can please do go and take a look at the full talk where you present all the evidence around what you've found so far. What stage is the project at now?
It's finished, and we're now at the stage where we're much more into an advocacy role of trying to kind of beyond Rwanda talk with, because obviously international publishers work in almost every country of the world now, and kind of the very basic thing of you're writing textbooks that children do not understand, and then moving on to kind of the higher levels of, okay, but we also need to be looking at the way that you're introducing Kinyarwanda or other local languages. You need to be looking at different sorts of activities that you're using, that kind of language development side, as well as the language accessibility.
Right. And I think that sort of tangle between the language and the pedagogy or the methodology that's used to introduce the language, it does seem to get quite confused sometimes, and I think, is that something that you found as well? That
I think it's incredibly difficult if you're not trained as a second language teacher. You're trained as a maths teacher or a science teacher, and that you're having to do any sort of code switching in the classroom, or going around and doing any teaching of the English. That's incredibly difficult if you've never been trained to do that, let alone when you're not fully proficient in that language. And also having to cope with all the demands of the subject itself. I suppose it's different from what maybe discussions that I've had before when people are talking specifically about teaching the language within a language classroom. But if you're looking at across the curriculum, you've also got the subject coming into it as well, which has to be... And I don't think you can really talk about language and content of the curriculum separately.
No,
because in my experience in a lot of African countries, the curriculum content is both hugely ambitious and overloaded, the amount that they're supposed to be learning in any particular lesson. So for a teacher to have a chance to be able to go back over a particular issue or explain something in a different language and see, even just check whether a child's understood something, is just, they don't have the space in the curriculum to be able to do that. I mean, they're rushing through to do the next thing.
Sure. And then children get left behind, and then
you have children that don't have, if you don't have the basic, say, maths. I mean, even by P4, they're supposed to be doing all sorts of different, say, fractions. And if you haven't got basic numeracy, how are you going to be learning fractions?
Exactly. Very interesting. Thank you. And just to ask you quickly, how have you found the conference? How are you? Are you enjoying have you enjoyed the last couple of days?
Really enjoyed it. So I tend to go to conferences that are more comparative education, and international development, where language is often 1 or 2 sessions, and I find it quite amazing how little language comes into any of the discussions around learning, quality of learning, education and development. And having only come into looking at language in the last 2 or 3 years, and having come at it from an education quality angle, it's been really interesting to come and be surrounded by people who the language is the key part of what they do. So I've learned a huge amount. I've really enjoyed it.
Excellent, fantastic. And that reminds me actually that there's several other conferences which have become been being publicised during this conference, and we'll be putting some details of those on our website as well. So anybody interested in the themes that are kind of being explored here, or similar ones, there are of course lots and lots of other conferences which look at similar things. So I'll be very interested to get any information from you as well about the comparative education. Okay, thank you very much for joining me.
You're welcome.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for watching. And as I said, the links to Lizzi's talk, she's also a participant in the debate, so there'll be a link to that below as well. So please do take a look. Thank you.